Greed.
Here. Oh! My
Greed.
GreedFall is an action RPG set in a medieval fantasy world with magic and swords and other things. It is, as of 2020, Spiders' latest game following the footsteps of Mars Warlogs, Bound by Flame, and the Technomancer. I've covered their previous 3 titles and was charmed by their jankiness and the so bad it's good nature, but also amazed by how much they've improved their craft. So it's really exciting to finally sit down and play through GreedFall and see where they're at now. Also, my reviews of their games have the most views out of any of my reviews for some reason. I guess a lot of people are curious about Spiders games but are just hesitant to try them out from seeing their review scores, but give them a shot. They may be jank, but it's the kind of jank that stays with you in the darkest of times and reminds you that the world is fucked, but at least we can still laugh about it. What am I talking about? The game starts with character creation. There's a fair amount of appearance options to choose from, and you can also set up your playstyle. You can be a rapier dude, longsword dude, heavy blunt dude, trap dude, not that kind, and magic dude. Also, you can choose to be a guy or a girl this time. There are also talents to choose from like charisma and intuition to persuade, science to make potions, lockpicking, craftsmanship for equipment upgrades, along with a new vigor talent for getting over obstacles to get special items. If you played a Technomancer before, it should be familiar to you. Next, you get a quick combat tutorial, say goodbye to your dying mother, and off to set sail to the island of Tirfredi to look for a cure for the Malachor disease that has tainted your people. But before that, you have to find your cousin, who's been captured by some bandits, or you can do some side quests and learn about the various factions in the game. The first 2 hours or so represents the game quite well, running around talking to people and getting into fights once in a while with the occasional boss fight. It's standard action RPG gameplay, nothing much to say about it. As with all RPGs, the story will determine its worth. Let's start with the graphics. It's better than the Technomancer in some ways, but it also took a few steps back. There's a slight brown filter going on and I don't get why. The game is pretty orange and brown already, so adding another layer just makes it look shitty. Like literally shitty. It's also kind of blurry and grainy. It got so bad to the point that I had to use some mods to remove the brown filter, blur and graininess, and sharpen the image a bit. But when the lighting hits just right, the game looks almost photorealistic. The lip syncing is still bad. It barely looks like the characters are saying what they're saying. The camera angles sometimes don't make sense. This is one time where characters are talking to each other, but the camera doesn't zoom in on whoever is speaking, or when a character gets covered by an object so you can't see them. It doesn't feel fine-tuned or polished. The performance on PC is weird too. Usually when a game doesn't run well, I turn down the shadows, draw distance, or post-processing effects to raise the FPS. Not this game. The textures had the most impact on frame rate, and I don't get why. They don't look any better than other modern AA or AAA titles. My graphics card can handle Shadow the Tomb Raider, Metro Exodus, but not GreedFall. Okay. The more I played, the more of the same buildings I see being recycled. Every governor's building has the same architecture and layout except with different textures, and every Desarde residence is the same. I would have liked something that represented each faction better rather than just a texture change. Like I said before, the gameplay is pretty standard as far as RPGs go. Go around talking to people, choose the outcome of a quest using dialogue, and the results differ depending on which skills you have or which companion you have in your party. Depending on which factions the quests involve, your companions may have something extra to contribute. The side content I think has some of the most interesting quests in the game, from underground arenas for judging prisoners to religious sex parties. It's pretty fun. With that said, there's a lot of running around, going back and forth to places, which is an issue I had with Technomancer. The map is too big for its own good. Most of the time, I'm just running in empty fields of nature. The environments are beautiful, it captures that autumn feel with the oranges, yellows, and greens. But there's nothing to do in it other than fighting wildlife once in a while and set up camps. Most of the quests only have you talking to people, which can be boring if you're not too into the quest line. It would have been nice to have more balance between talking and combat encounters to mix things up more. There's a fast travel system and it does speed up the gameplay the more areas you discover, but it still has too much walking around. Stealth is more relevant in GreedFall. There are quests where you have to sneak in somewhere to get something. There's also this hitman mechanic where you can disguise yourself as a member of one of the factions and you can sneak into places that way, which is neat. Combat is another step back. I prefer using fast melee weapons like the dagger and gun from the Technomancer, but there's no equivalent here. In GreedFall, there's a rapier, longsword, and heavy blunts. They work well enough, but it's not any more smoother than the staff or blunt and shield weapons in the Technomancer. Everything just feels stiff here, which I guess it fits the weapon types, but I don't know, would have been nice to have something like the dagger and gun here. Just like the Technomancer, you can attack, block and parry, dodge. There's also the addition of Fury attacks, which is just a more powerful normal attack that uses a Fury bar. This is janky too, because in many occasions when I use a Fury attack, it doesn't connect with the enemy. Every time I think it'll hit, it doesn't, even when I was right next to the enemies. It's very frustrating. There's a stasis ability that lets you freeze enemies, which is cool, though it can be used to cheese a lot of fights. I found the difficulty to be just right though. It's way more balanced and I didn't have to Dark Souls around every second to not die. It only gets more difficult when I was fighting bosses, which makes sense. Bosses are usually these Cthulhu looking hentai tentacle monsters. Some of them even has tits. I like tits. They're fun and challenging to fight, but there's not much variety though. There are around 4 or 5 different boss types, not counting the reusage of the tentacle things, and it can get a bit repetitive in this 20+ hour game, but they have interesting lore behind them, so that's a plus. There are bullshit and bugs, obviously. When an enemy step out of their spawn area, they become unaware of the player and reset their health. Why did they program it like this? It hurts my asshole when I'm close to finishing off a strong enemy just for it to fully recover in a second. What is this, the Elite Four? There are missions where you have to wait a certain amount of time before you are able to continue. I get that it's required in the context of certain quests for realism, but it doesn't add anything to the quality of the quests at all. Just do a time lapse. The shadows look weird on faces and in caves sometimes. I found myself getting stuck on small objects a lot. Then there's this. None of these things ruin the experience. They might have been a bit too ambitious again and forgot to polish the game. Classic spiders. The story, I think, is the best part of the game. You play as Desarde, the legate of the Congregation of Merchants. Your people are dying from a plague and you have to go find a cure on the island of Tirfridi. The main quest has you travel all over the island meeting with the factions, doing politics, and by politics I mean being an errand boy and fixing their shit to get like points. Each faction has their own quirk. The Taleme is a bunch of religious racists, the Bridge Alliance is a bunch of racist kidnappers, the Knots are baby-stealing pirates, the Coin Guards are traders, and the Congregation of Merchants are colonialists. Everyone is shitty and no one is clearly in the right. It's not even morally gray now that I think about it. The only good faction is the natives, whose violent actions are the most justified since Tirfridi is their island, and they've been invaded by outsiders. I didn't find myself liking any of them, but that might just be the point of the game. They're all greedy fucks who wants to have everything run exactly the way they want it to. It's your choice if you want to help them despite their flaws or not to create a better future for everyone. The campaigns are okay. You get one from each faction and it's interesting when they share their point of view in a situation. It shows just how different their ideologies are. Their quests are also pretty interesting. I like Kurt's quest the most with the hidden military camp. It felt the most personal out of everyone's quest, but I think they could have been more personal. For me, the golden standard in Companions is Mass Effect 2. BioWare went all out on that, going into their past, personal problems, how they ended up with the player, all that good shit. I think the Technomancer did a better job in this department than GreedFall. They could have done better with Constantine too. He's the cousin of Desarde and is the governor of New Serene, the area the Congregation of Merchants occupies. We don't know much about him other than he's the comedic relief man, his parents are disappointed in him, and yeah, that's all. He becomes a huge part of the story later on, but I didn't really feel much for him. It just lacks that extra bit of character development, I think. Overall, the campaigns are not bad, just bland. GreedFall is as much of an improvement as it is a step back from the Technomancer. The island of Tirfridi is huge and beautiful, but feels empty with nothing much to do except killing wildlife and set up camps. The graphics can be photorealistic at times, but looks really brown and muddy with its overuse of post-processing effects. The combat is more balanced and fun, but it doesn't feel as smooth as it can be and the hitboxes are weird. The story and premise are good, but none of the factions and characters are particularly likable. There were some weird design decisions for some of the quests and the game is visibly buggy from the lack of polish, but it's not game breaking. There's always a but with everything in this game. But it's still satisfying leveling up my character from a small guy with a weak sword to an absolute beast with all my armor and weapons upgraded with the best add-ons. I have fun with what was here. There's also this made up language for the natives, which further increases that immersion level. And you even get to learn like a few words here and there. It may not be as big a step forward as Bound by Flame to the Technomancer, but it's still a step in the right direction. GreedFall is a AA game that has the potential to feel like a AAA one. We don't really get games like this anymore. A full-featured RPG with no season passes or microtransactions. As flawed as this game is, no wonder people are praising Spiders for their work. We can't take games like this for granted. With all that said, here are some things I would like to see in Spiders' next game. Don't make a huge world. Make a compact but lively one with more unique looking areas, and just put a bunch of fun side content in it, because running around in an empty field back and forth is just boring as hell. Refine the smaller things like movement so we don't get stuck on small areas, and lip syncing so it doesn't ruin the immersion. After that, make the combat smoother, put some more time into the characters and factions, and just keep polishing. Don't spend all that time making the world bigger. Focus on making a small to medium sized world with well thought out gameplay and likable people. That should fix all the major issues I have with Spiders games. By the time I'm finished with this video, Spiders should have already announced their new game, so I'm excited to see where they go next. Until then, I'll continue to make unprofessional gaming videos that not many people will watch. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about the game or the video in the comments, or make a suggestion on what I should review next. I'm gonna go fab now. Bye.